As you might have noticed, this is my third video covering pirate artillery. Originally, it was all going to be one video, and then I realized I best make an instructional video on their handling. And the day before I published the previous one, I discovered some new information on the ammunition. And here we are. Muzzle-loading firearms had the benefit of technically being able to fire anything. As long as you could stuff it down the barrel, you could shoot it. That doesn't mean you should. It might not be especially effective, and you might damage the gun barrel. If the barrel sustained damage, continuous fire would make the cracks expand before the piece finally burst. Then everyone nearby will have a pretty bad time. And technically you can fire anything from any firearm, even modern ones, if you customize your cartridges. But loading a muzzle loader with different ammo types required fewer steps. The loading process was pretty much always the same, regardless of shot. Powder cartridge, wadding, shot, wadding, and priming powder in the touch hole. Wadding served two purposes. In my video on how to load a cannon, I said that you didn't need wadding after the powder if you used a paper cartridge, but it seems I was wrong. Wadding after the powder was always necessary, but for the same reasons I said in that video. To seal in the gases of the explosion and deliver the shot with maximum force and accuracy. Otherwise, some of the energy would slip past the windage of the shot and go to waste. Wadding was also loaded after the shot, but this was mostly to keep the shot from falling out of the barrel if it was aimed straight or depressed. If the barrel was elevated at any positive angle, wadding after the shot was unnecessary. This also means that if you wanted to remove the shot, all you had to do was remove the wad after it with the worm and then depress the barrel so the shot just rolled out. But what is wadding exactly? Any soft, flexible material which can easily be loaded, keep the powder and shot in place, but will also shoot out or burn away from the barrel when fired. Manuals mostly mention hay, twisted rope, yarn, and oakum. All of these could easily be found aboard a ship. Hay was kept as food for livestock. Oakum was a tarred fiber used to seal the gaps in woodwork. The carpenter would always have plenty on hand. Rope and yarn should be obvious, however, they had to be properly twisted. Loose rope could impact the power and accuracy of the shot. The picture on screen shows rope wadding recovered from one of the cannons aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge, Blackbeard's ship. I'll be showing plenty of examples from her. You could also use improvised wadding. Most commonly, we find pirates using paper torn from books and documents. When Olivier Levasseur and John Taylor plundered the 700-ton Nossa Senhora do Cabo, they discovered aboard priceless manuscripts from China. These were torn apart, and the pages used to make cartridge paper and shot wadding. In the wreck of the Queen Anne's Revenge, they discovered a swivel gun wadded with pages torn from a book called A Voyage to the South Seas, written by a certain Captain Edward Cook. Some interesting theories can be surmised from this find. For one, Cook had sailed in concert with Woodes Rogers, a staunch enemy of Blackbeard and all pirates. Secondly, some pirates may not have respected books at all. In another incident, a pirate officer cast plundered books overboard, claiming that their contents might convince his shipmates to abandon their piratical way of life. The projectile discharged from the cannon was referred to as the shot. Most common was the round shot. We know it today as a cannonball, but in the period they typically called it a bullet. Bullets fired from small arms, like pistols and muskets, were distinguished from cannon bullets by being called small shot, musket balls, or pistol balls. As I mentioned in the previous video, round shot struggled at sinking a ship. It was hard to aim below the waterline, impossible at a close distance, and the water would weaken velocity. Carpenters below deck were always ready to plug the potential holes with shot plugs. We usually imagine bullets as being big, very big, the size of heads. Only the absolute largest of cannons fired cannonballs the size of someone's head. Minions, one of the most common pirate guns, fired bullets that weighed between 3 to 4 pounds. A carton of milk weighs 2. They had a diameter of 3 inches, which should be about the size of your fist. I'll present you a table which shows the weight of shot and their diameters. In the previous part of this series, I showed a simplified table on the guns most used by pirates. It includes the weight of the shot they fired, so you can use that table as a reference in this one, if you want to learn the size of each gun's bullet. So you weren't too likely to get hit directly by a bullet, unlike that unfortunate guy in the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie. But they could do other sorts of damage. If you stood by as a bullet flew past, the pressure alone was enough to knock you out, give bruises, and cause internal bleedings. And when the bullet clove through the woodwork, it wouldn't make a clean exit. It would send forth a storm of razor-sharp splinters, wooden daggers cutting through the air, taking out eyes and piercing arteries. There's a reason why sailors, and pirates by proxy, were so heavily associated with missing limbs and eye patches. In a sea battle, splinters were one of the most common causes behind death and injury. Crossbar shot was a variant of the basic bullet, which had a long spike cast through it. The spike was bound with oakum and canvas to prevent it from damaging the piece when fired. I'm really not sure what this bullet was good for, if it was better at piercing woodwork, or if it would start spinning when fired. Similar, and kind of opposite to the crossbar, was the double-headed shot, or simply bar shot. It was basically two bullets connected with an iron bar, but they could look radically different. Some matched my initial description. Others didn't have bullets, but these short sort of hockey pucks. Others like two split bullets joined by a bar. Others were short and stubby, with stubby cones at the end, and I've seen this variant in a lot of different shapes. The French would sometimes hollow out their bar shot and fill it with a combustible mixture. A fuse was stuck in one of the balls, and when the gun fired, the bar would spin around and spew fire. This flaming bar was fired at the sails. There were variants of the bar shot. The type of bar shot depicted on screen would expand when fired. Whilst the original bar shot was flexible, chain shot was only fired at open targets. It consisted of two smaller bullets connected by a chain. Appearance could vary. When loaded, it was nuzzled up neatly into a single ball, but when fired, it would spread out and spin in a terrifying arc. If it struck a hull, it would do little to no damage, but when fired above the hull, it could cleave through entire ranks of men, canvas, rope, even masts. No one seems certain about the real effective difference between bar and chain shot. The popular consensus is that bar shot was good against masts and chain against sails. It's a simple answer, and as you might know, I don't provide simple answers. Period sources are never vivid about the advantage of either, if there even was any. Bar and chain are both described as good against sails, masts, and rigging, or they get no description whatsoever. What is certain is that they were popular and used simultaneously. Remember, pirates and merchants really just fired whatever was available. One of the best shots for destroying sails was the star shot, also called langrel. It consisted of 4 pieces, each holding a quadrant-shaped head, an iron bar, and a link. The links of the 4 pieces were connected, and the quadrants put together into a single bullet. When fired, the 4 branches would spread out into a star. According to a mid-18th century manual, it was never used by the Navy, but a favorite shot among, quote, privateers and other such piratical rovers. Indeed, whilst the shot we've been discussing previously was primarily made from cast iron, alternatives were often utilized. The heads of chain, bar shot, and their weird variants were often made of lead and attached onto a cast iron bar or chain or whatever. Gunners' manuals always take stone shot into account. Made from marble or pebble, stone shot was as effective as iron, but since it required a skilled stonemason to produce, was oftentimes more expensive, which is ultimately why cast iron balls replaced it. But on desperate occasion, ballast stones could be taken out from the hold and loaded into the guns. Alternative metals were also fired. One pirate crew in the Indian Ocean were described as firing tin and tutenagel, a metal from China. In general, round shot wasn't preferred by pirates. One French filibuster crew was described as having only one aboard. They used it for grinding mustard. They fired whatever they could get their hands on, loading multiple shots at the same time and just spamming at close range. Their favorite shot was case or canister shot. It consisted of a container made from wood, paper, tin, or pasteboard and filled with all sorts of crap. In Pirates of the Caribbean, we saw them loading their guns with forks, and this tactic wasn't alien at all. Pirates were documented as loading glass bottles, bells, teapots, and expensive chinaware. Gunners' manuals from the period recommended that you used musket balls, nails, stones, and scrap metal. What does scrap metal include exactly? Most common were old chain links and sprues. Sprues are excess material cut away from iron objects following casting. Bundles of sprues were found loaded in a canvas bag aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge. However, unlike what we see in the first POTC movie, you wouldn't load canister freely. This would damage the barrel, and as I said previously, a damaged barrel ain't no fun. Of course, you might say they didn't have the time to put the junk in cases, or maybe they didn't have cases and they were desperate. Sea battles could take hours, days, so you certainly had time. And if you didn't have cases, you could still put the junk into a bundle and wrap it tightly with yarn or cloth. Evidence for this mode of loading has, again, been found in the wreckage of the QAR. This method was also described in a manual from 1769. A particular kind of shot, formed of bolts, nails, bars, or other pieces of iron tied together, and forming a sort of cylinder, which corresponds with the bore of the cannon. This manual refers to this type of shot as langrel or langrage, and it has become the go-to name for junk shot in movies like POTC. I also remember seeing langrage in Pirates of the Burning Sea, a video game. But I've never seen langrage used in this context before 1769, which is way after the Golden Age. In the 17th century, langrel referred to starshot. But the similarity between starshot and langrage are striking, so maybe there's a shared, though mysterious, origin point. The manual also referred to langrage as mitraille in French. This word was used for canister as far back as the 17th century, but the French kinda used it for any scattering junk shot. In English, canister and junk was also called barrel and partridge. Obviously, it was only fired at close distance and only at open targets. The cheap cost allowed pirates to fire lots and lots of it, and the sheer volume, combined with musket volleys, could reduce the sails and rigging to Swiss cheese, forcing the crew below deck, allowing the pirates to board and take the vessel. I encountered a late 18th century account of a sailor killed by langrage. Mr. Bill was killed in the first of the engagement by a piece of langrage, which took off the upper part of his head. He died instantly. The Royal Navy viewed langrage as gas attacks in World War I, napalm in the Nam, or how some do drone warfare today. They claimed it was only used by pirates, and often cited as a favorite of the French. There existed some tricks to optimize the effectiveness of canister. If you loaded a bullet after the case, it could pierce the woodwork, allowing some of the junk to enter through the hole. This type of load was, again, discovered aboard the QAR. On rare occasions, the French would combine canister and powder cartridge into a single unit called the cartouche. It allowed for much faster loading. All you had to do was ram the cartouche home, prick it, prime, and you were ready to fire. I've only ever found a description of it from a single manual, and it's from 1758, way after the Golden Age, but I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions. I find the prospect of pirates just spitting out broadside upon broadside of cheap and fast-firing junk at their enemy to be quite enticing. In the 19th century, cartouches would become standard equipment in most militaries. A more sophisticated form of canister was grape shot. Grape shot is a combination of large bullets glued onto a wooden support frame called a sabot, put into a canvas bag, and corded strongly into a cylinder. The finished product looks like a bundle of grapes, hence the name. The size of the grapes varied. A minion would have fired balls that each had a diameter of a quarter inch and weighed around 8 ounces. The manual from 1769 was so kind as to provide a table for grape shot construction. Grape shot was more expensive and only really used by the Royal Navy. Pirates, merchants, and Frenchmen preferred canister. But aside from cost, was there any tactical difference? Neither of them could pierce woodwork. They were fired at open targets, so gun ports, open decks, and rigging. Owing to the larger and more predictable projectiles, you were likelier to get killed instantly by grape shot. Bartholomew Roberts, the famous pirate, got struck in the throat by a grape and died instantly. Canister was much more sinister. You were less likely to get killed by it, instantly. There are descriptions of discharged hooks tearing off arms and limbs. Pieces of glass or stone might burst inside of you. The bits would be hard to remove and cause infection. Pirates depended on scare tactics, And canister must have been terrifying. Only the most demented of savages would fire this random crap at you. That should cover most, if not all of the shot fired from Age of Sail cannon. And yes, cannon, without the S, is a correct plural. A quick summary of the most important details. Projectiles loaded into a cannon were called shot. Cannonballs were called round shot or bullet. At long range, you only fired bullets, loaded one at a time. At closer ranges, you could use different shot types, and also load multiple shot at once, to do more and different types of damage. Bar shot was good against rigging, chain shot was great for rigging and crew out in the open. Canister shot or langrage was cheap, excellent against sails and crew, and the favorite shot for pirates. Grape shot was a more sophisticated version of canister. That should be it. Huge thanks to my generous channel members and Patreon supporters. In particular, Cole Freer, Max Dweck, 1660, Michaela Jans, Daniel Stryker, Sea Dog, Randall DeVere, Old Man Zed, and Krillov. If you'd like to interact with me or fellow pirate history enjoyers, please check out the link to our Discord server in the video description. Hope to see you there. Cheers!